reality feels incredibly solid, doesn't it? It's defined by everything we see, hear, touch.
Yeah, it really does.
But what if some of the most fundamental forces shaping everything around us are completely, utterly beyond our senses? What if the universe, maybe even our own lives, are constantly being influenced by things we just can't perceive?
That's a huge question, and it's pretty much what we're tackling in this deep dive. We're stepping into the world of diamagnetism.
Diamagnetism.
Yeah, it's this property of matter that seems so subtle, almost like non-existent in daily life.
Right.
But it's actually an incredibly powerful way to think about the nature of reality and exactly those unseen influences you mentioned.
Okay, so we've got a bunch of your sources here, articles, some research that really dig into the science of it. But they don't just stop at the science, do they?
Yeah.
They use this quiet phenomenon as a kind of metaphor.
Exactly. A really potent one, showing how these invisible dynamics are always at play, from the cosmic scale right down to, well, human interactions.
Yeah, the material you brought gives us that foundation. It lets us go from, like, the quantum physics of it.
Right, the nitty-gritty.
And connect it to these much bigger, more profound ideas about what reality even is.
Precisely.
So get ready, everyone. This deep dive, it's really designed to challenge your perception of what's real.
Yeah, definitely.
We'll explore this idea of universal, unseen engagement and uncover how even stuff we think of as totally inert,
like wood or water.
Yeah. How they're actually active participants in the whole cosmic setup.
And what's so fascinating, I think, about diamagnetism is how it just directly confronts our reliance on our senses.
How so?
Well, we build our whole picture of reality based on what we can see, hear, feel, right?
Sure, makes sense.
But diamagnetism is fundamental, it's universal, and it operates completely outside that immediate sensory bubble.
Right, like the sources point out, you think about things we call non-magnetic. Yeah, like a piece of wood or maybe a copper penny.
Yeah, good examples.
You put a strong fridge magnet next to them, nothing happens. You don't feel that satisfying click or pull you get with iron.
Exactly, nothing.
So our senses tell us, okay, magnetically, these things are just sitting there, doing nothing.
Precisely, and that's the illusion you see. It's what our senses trick us into thinking. Your sources explain that the reason wood and copper seem inert magnetically is because their response is just incredibly weak.
How weak?
Like millions of times weaker than, say, iron, ferromagnetic stuff.
Wow, okay. Millions.
Yeah, it's so faint it just gets completely overwhelmed by everything else. Gravity, air currents, even just tiny vibrations. You simply can't feel it directly.
And yet, it is happening. That's the kicker, isn't it?
That's the mind-bending part.
It's a real physical effect you can measure with instruments, but it's utterly unperceivable by us on our own. So, if something this fundamental is going on everywhere, all the time, totally below our sensory radar.
It just forces you to ask, what else is constantly shaping our world that we simply don't notice? The material we looked at really hammers this gap between something being imperceptible and it being real. It fundamentally challenges the idea that direct perception is the only reality.
Or even the ultimate reality.
Exactly. It kind of suggests our everyday perceived reality is maybe just a thin sensory slice.
Thin sensory slice, I like that.
Of a far richer, way more complex universe out there.
That image really sticks with you, and it's not just about certain special materials, is it? The sources are clear. This isn't some rare thing.
Oh, not at all. Not at all. This is where the universality comes in. Diamagnetism is a property of all matter.
All matter.
Every single atom. Whether it's in the air we're breathing right now, the water in that glass, the cells in your body, or, hydrogen gas way out in some distant galaxy, it all shows some degree of diamagnetic response.
So everything, everywhere, constantly is doing this subtle pushback against any magnetic field it runs into.
Exactly that, a pervasive, constant engagement. That just goes completely unnoticed in our everyday experience. This quiet, underlying influence is happening whether there's a big magnet nearby or just, the Earth's own magnetic field.
It's like a ceaseless dance we can't see.
A ceaseless, invisible dance,
Okay, so how does this pushback actually work? Like at the deep level. Your sources mention the quantum mechanics behind it.
Yeah, this is where we gotta zoom right down to the electrons.
Okay.
So the key in diamagnetic stuff, like our wood and copper examples, is that the electrons are almost always paired up.
Paired up?
Yeah, think of it like For every electron spinning one way, there's another one right next to it spinning the opposite way.
So they cancel each other out, magnetically speaking.
Pretty much, yeah. They cancel out their inherent magnetic tendencies.
Yeah.
So the atom itself doesn't really have a built-in magnetic personality, like a tiny compass needle always pointing north or something.
Got it. No natural bar magnet inside the atom.
Right. But here's the subtle part. When an external magnetic field comes along, it slightly influences the motion of these paired electrons. It's like a tiny nudge. And according to this fundamental physics principle, Lenz's law,
Lenz's law. Okay.
whenever you try to change the magnetic environment around electrons, they react. They create their own minuscule magnetic field in response.
And that tiny induced field,
Yeah.
it always points the other way,
Mm-hmm.
opposite to the external one.
Exactly. It's a reaction against the incoming field. It creates that very, very weak repulsive force. A subtle no thank you to the external magnetic influence. And your sources use wood and copper as classic examples. Their specific electron arrangements just lead to this quiet little act of defiance at the quantum level.
And because that force is so incredibly weak compared to, say, gravity or friction,
Right.
we don't see the wood block floating away from the magnet. It's just this tiny, unnoticed interaction happening constantly.
Constantly, yeah. The sources also mention paramagnetism and ferromagnetism, like in hematite or lodestone.
Right, the stronger magnetic effect.
Yeah, they sort of sit on top of this universal diamagnetism. It's important context.
How so?
Well, paramagnetic materials, like hematite, they do have some unpaired electrons. And these tiny internal magnets, they align weakly with an external field. So that causes a weak attraction.
Okay, attraction, opposite of diamagnetism's repulsion.
Right. And then ferromagnetic materials like lodestone or iron, they have really strong internal alignment. That creates the powerful, familiar attraction we know from magnets.
The fridge magnet effect.
Exactly. But here's the thing. Even those materials, the paramagnetic and ferromagnetic ones, they still have the underlying diamagnetic response happening too.
Really?
Yep. It's just completely swamped, completely overwhelmed by the stronger attractive effects. Diamagnetism is like the silent, universal baseline underneath it all.
Okay, that's fascinating science. It really shows this hidden, ubiquitous layer of reality we just don't see. But then the sources take this and run with it, using it as a metaphor, right?
Yeah.
First for cosmic mysteries.
Yes. This is where it gets really cool. Extending the science into bigger questions, your sources draw these really powerful parallels between diamagnetism, this pervasive, unseen influence, and huge cosmological mysteries like dark matter and dark energy.
Okay, yeah. Those are massive forces shaping the entire universe, aren't they?
Yeah.
Like the extra gravity holding galaxies together, or whatever's making space expand faster and faster.
Exactly.
But we can't directly see or touch them at all.
Precisely. We only know they're there because we see their gravitational effects on things we can see.
Right, indirect evidence.
And diamagnetism, in its own small way, kind of reinforces this idea. It shows us that what looks like empty space, or seems like passive matter, isn't necessarily just sitting there doing nothing.
It's participating.
It's an active participant,
Yeah.
constantly engaging with fundamental forces. This subtle, inherent resistance or engagement, it seems key to complexity, key to the ongoing dynamics of the cosmos.
That actually makes a lot of sense. If matter we can see and touch has this subtle, unseen interaction happening, it's maybe not such a huge leap to think the universe is full of other unseen forces or substances that we only detect by their effect.
It fits the pattern, doesn't it?
Yeah. And the sources also bring this metaphor much closer to home, to like human systems.
This is a really insightful connection they make. Just like every atom has this inherent diamagnetic pushback. Maybe all human systems, individuals, teams, organizations, whole societies have inherent, often unconscious resistances or counterforces operating just below the surface.
So you mean not the loud, obvious, no, I disagree kind of resistance,
No, not that.
but more like a subtle pushback you might not even recognize as happening.
Precisely. Think about maybe a new idea being introduced in a team meeting or in a community.
Okay.
It's not overtly rejected, right? Nobody stands up and argues against it.
Yeah.
But it just fizzles. It fails to gain momentum. It almost seems subtly repelled.
Yeah, I've seen that happen.
And this might not be active sabotage or anything malicious. It could just be the collective unconscious inertia of old habits, or maybe an unarticulated discomfort with change, or deeply held assumptions nobody's even examined.
Like diamagnetism, there's no clear bad guy pushing back. It's just An inherent tendency of the system.
Exactly. An inherent structural tendency to push back or resist flow in a certain direction.
That totally resonates. It's like that feeling when you hit an invisible wall or you feel like you're trying to swim against a current you can't actually see.
And that connects straight into the idea of unconscious bias or filters that the sources mention.
Okay.
Every individual, and therefore every system we are part of, carries implicit biases, cultural norms, historical baggage. These aren't always conscious decisions we make, but they act like these pervasive, unseen filters that subtly repel certain ideas or perspectives or even people while letting others pass through more easily.
So even if we're consciously trying really hard to be open-minded or fair,
Yeah.
our inherent sort of diamagnetic filters, our biases, might be quietly pushing back against certain viewpoints without us even realizing it's happening.
That's the power of the metaphor, I think. It suggests these aren't necessarily deliberate choices, but maybe inherent tendencies just ingrained in the structure of how we think or the fabric of our social setups.
The sources also talked about pervasive background forces. What's that about?
Well, think about things like social norms or shared values, cultural narratives. Most of the time, we're not consciously debating them or enforcing them, are we?
They're just there.
Assume.
They're just there.
Yeah.
The fundamental backdrop to how we interact, like the constant diamagnetic response of the air around us, they're just universally present, quietly influencing behavior, setting boundaries, without needing overt conscious action all the time.
They're like the silent conductors of our personal and social lives.
That's a great way to put it. And finally, a really crucial point the sources make. Just because a single diamagnetic interaction is incredibly weak.
Right, one atom pushing back doesn't do much. It doesn't mean the overall effect is insignificant. Not at all.
The cumulative effect.
Yes, this is key. One atom's repulsion is tiny, yes, but you get billions upon billions upon billions of atoms in a piece of wood, or a body of water, or just the air in a room. And collectively, they create a measurable, undeniable effect. Think of those experiments levitating frogs.
Oh, yeah, with super strong magnets.
Exactly. So, metaphorically speaking, countless small, maybe unobserved influences, tiny biases, slight resistances, quiet agreements can accumulate.
And build up.
And build up to create really powerful trends or resistances or dynamics in society and organizations, maybe even in our own personal lives.
Like how, a widespread subtle discomfort with a new policy, maybe just expressed through tiny hesitations or quiet eye rolls across a company, could collectively repel that policy more effectively than one single loud protest ever could.
Absolutely. Or think about the quiet erosion of trust in a relationship, or the slow shift in public opinion on an issue. These are often the result of innumerable, small, almost unnoticed interactions just adding up over time.
It's a powerful reminder, then, that really significant outcomes can come from forces we never consciously register.
Definitely. And while our own biological senses might completely miss these subtle interactions,
our instruments don't.
Right. The sources rightly highlight the role of scientific instruments here. They act as extensions of our senses, don't they?
Yeah, they let us see things operating way beyond our built-in capacity.
They reveal this much more intricate active reality happening all around us beneath the surface.
They force us, really, to look beyond just the obvious stuff, the strong attractions or repulsions, and appreciate the subtle, the pervasive, the deeply fundamental forces operating in the background, shaping everything, whether we sense them directly or not.
It's a whole hidden layer.
So wrapping this up, what does this deep dive into diamagnetism really leave us with? What are the key takeaways?
Well, I think first we've seen how this subtle pushback of all matter against magnetic fields, diamagnetism, it's a universal fundamental force.
Everywhere, all the time.
Everywhere, all the time, but it exists almost entirely outside our direct senses.
Yeah.
It usually escapes our notice because it's just so incredibly weak compared to the forces we do feel.
And it's very imperceptibility. That's the challenge, isn't it? It challenges that easy assumption that what we directly perceive is the ultimate reality.
Exactly. It strongly suggests our everyday experience is just that. That thin sensory slice of a much richer, far more complex universe.
Right.
And then we explored how this subtle, unseen influence works as such a powerful metaphor.
Yeah, not just for the big cosmic mysteries like dark matter and dark energy.
Right, though that's fascinating in itself.
But also for those hidden dynamics in human systems.
Yeah.
You know, the subtle resistances, the unconscious biases, the quiet power of lots of small influences adding up.
Yeah, those structural tendencies.
Understanding diamagnetism, then, it really encourages you the listener, to look beyond the obvious, to try to appreciate the intricate, often hidden dynamics that define existence itself.
It shows you that even when things seem magnetically silent, or even just sensorially quiet, there's actually a profound and ceaseless engagement always underway. Things are always interacting.
Always interacting, even if we don't see it.
Which leaves us with a pretty provocative thought to consider, maybe. If something as fundamental and universal as diamagnetism is constantly interacting with everything around you, completely unnoticed by your senses, what other unseen forces might be subtly shaping your world, your decisions right now, without you ever realizing it?
What subtle pushbacks or maybe alignments are happening in your life or in the systems you're part of, your family, your workplace, your community, much like that piece of wood or copper reacting invisibly in a magnetic field?
Exactly. What's going on beneath the surface? Something to definitely think about as you navigate your world.